Greetings everyone, this is David Arhan, and today's video is going to be a response to Inspiring Philosophy's comments against Christian nationalism. Now, he has made a video against it more than a year ago, but it's only very recently that he has started to excessively tweet against what people call Christian nationalism. And I want to respond to some of his arguments. Now, before I refute some of the arguments that he does make against it, I just want to make something clear, and that is my dislike towards the term Christian nationalism. I think it's an astroturf term. I don't think people should be using that terminology. It's akin to calling someone a pro-life Christian, as if someone can also be a pro-choice Christian, or as if being pro-life is, amongst, it's just one form of Christianity that one can choose from. That is ridiculous. There is no such thing as pro-life Christianity. There's no such thing as pro-choice Christianity. There's no such thing as Christian nationalism. There is just Christianity. So having said that, some people might misunderstand me. I do believe Christianity is inherently pro-life. I just don't think that you should be calling it pro-life Christianity, because it's just Christianity. So likewise, being a quote nationalist is also part of Christianity. Now, what I mean by this is I'm just going to let Michael Jones define the terms for me, because this is a response to Michael Jones, and he in fact does define what Christian nationalism is in his idea. So according to his video that he made it more than a year ago, titled "Does Christianity Cause Christian Nationalism?" his definition of Christian nationalism is: Christian values and doctrine should have power over the state and culture, and that the nation or culture should be defined by aspects within Christianity, and the government should be active in enforcing this. Now, many of you who regularly do watch me and watch my content will look at this and think, this is just incredibly reasonable. This is just very reasonable. Why will anyone be against this? But Michael Jones, in fact, does not think so. Michael Jones thinks that trying to have Christian values and doctrines, having them be influential, having them have power, and that the government, having the government side with Christianity, he thinks that this is in fact a satanic perversion of Christianity. So Michael Jones does not think that this is sensible. In fact, he thinks this is ridiculous and satanic. Now, it seems pretty clear then, in spite of his protestations against having these terms applied to him, it's very clear that Michael Jones is someone who has the views of a liberal secularist. It's very clear that he desires, not really desire, but that he believes in the separation of the church and state. And if desiring Christian values to have power over state and culture, and that the government should actively enforce such things as satanic, then it is pretty clear that he is by definition secular. Now, what's interesting here, though, and this is part of the refutation, is that what Michael Jones argues against Christian nationalism, what he argues against, is actually something that he does believe in. He is a Christian nationalist by his own definition. And just one example that I'm going to use for this. A very clear example of this is that in a different tweet, he speaks out against the persecution of Christians, which obviously, we should be speaking out against Christians being persecuted. Christians should not be persecuted, right? He says Christians are being persecuted and targeted by radical Muslims in Pakistan yet again. We need an international outcry at this injustice. Now, this is very interesting. An international outcry against this injustice. Now, this is ironic because although an international outcry may mean a lot of different things, in most, if not all, of the definitions that he might potentially be using within this context, it's a form of establishing some kind of force, whether this is verbal force, right, by persuasion, or this is by, international outcries and, you need to stop doing this, or we're going to do X to you, right? Yeah, that is, you need to stop doing this, right? That is, using some kind of force, some kind of power, some kind of authority, in this case, over the country of Pakistan, the people of Pakistan, so that they do what? So that they stop persecuting Christians. Well, guess what? This is a very clear example of using Christian values and doctrines and having it have power over the state and culture, in this case of Pakistan, by saying that there should be an international outcry against Pakistan. You are in fact advocating for Christian nationalism, again by Michael Jones's own definition. And so this clearly shows that in fact what people call Christian nationalism is in fact a part of Christianity, because it's a part of Christian morality. you see. So we see then those who argue against so-called Christian nationalism and use slogans like "you can't legislate morality," right? This is something a lot of people use, like the Fordhamites, like Aristotle Papanikolaou. These people use this term. You can't legislate morality within. This is not something that we believe in Orthodox Christianity. That's what they claim. They don't realize that much of legislation, a lot of legislation is based on morality. Something as simple as murder is in fact a moral issue that one legislates on. And if one is a Christian and believes that morality and ethics are ultimately sourced and grounded not just in, nature or some kind of, like the universe, but in God, right, which Christians believe ethics and morality is ultimately sourced in God, then the opposition to murder is in fact, again, an act of enforcing Christian morality, which again will mean that you believe Christian values and doctrines should have power over the state and culture, and that the government should be active in enforcing this, right? If you're a Christian, you believe this is what the government should do, that the government should legislate against murder. That's, again, by Michael Jones' definition, that's a form of Christian nationalism. Even if another worldview can claim that they're opposed to this act being murder, from the Christian standpoint, the opposition to murder is, again, nevertheless a Christian act. Even something as simple as this is a very explicit example of how Christian values should have power over the nation and the culture. Moreover, even though many worldviews and adherents of those worldviews can oppose acts like murder, whether they can justify their opposition is another matter. For instance, many atheists, right, they will say murder is evil, but they also reject objective moral principles. They believe in relativism, right? So they're effectively saying that it's just a matter of personal opinion, which is, again, fundamentally wrong. So even if they, in some sense, we might agree with an atheist who says murder is wrong, the reason why we believe murder is wrong is because it's against objective moral principles established by God. An atheist believes murder is wrong because it's just his own personal opinion. Well, there's still a fundamental disagreement. That atheist has not justified why murder is evil. It's still, from the Christian standpoint, the opposition to murder is still a Christian belief that is enforced by the government. The opposition to murder, that is. So the opposition to what people call Christian nationalism also has some kind of connection with pacifism, since both oppose resisting evil via force. And they use verses such as "My kingdom is not of this world," right, to justify their, honestly, in my honest opinion, heretical beliefs. However, even people who are anti-Christian nationalism, so these people, they're not pacifists, they're just against Christian nationalism. Even these people can recognize the absurdity of not using physical force to resist evil. After all, who in their right mind will think that we can stop murderers, rapists, thieves, etc. by trying to just gently persuade them, right? Not to do those things. If someone, goes into your house, right? If a thief comes into your house, or if he's about to murder you, are you just going to say, "Dude, don't murder me. Please don't do anything bad"? Are you just going to try to persuade him not to do that? No, you are going to, a normal person with sanity is going to use physical force to defend himself, to defend his loved ones, to defend his family, right? Not only is this idea of gently persuading someone who's a murderer or rapist, not only is this absurd, it's also in fact evil. By refusing to use physical force is in fact evil, because by refusing to use force to stop people from committing evil, we are effectively allowing them to do those evil deeds. So an example that one can use is, let's say someone is walking on the road and a car is about to crash them. You're going to have to use force, that is push them, right? Push them from the way in order to save them, right? If you're going to say, "No, I'm a pacifist, I'm not going to use force," then what's going to happen is that, okay, that person's not going to be pushed, but that person is just going to die from that car crash, right? So this is an excellent example that illustrates the necessity of physical force in order to maintain order in society. And this is in fact a Christian principle, right? Resisting evil is very clearly a Christian principle. And if it is commonsensical to oppose such deeds, how more commonsensical will it be to take that extra step forward and legislate other aspects of human lives to help orient it towards the truth? Now, Christianity is not dependent on a Sharia-like religious legal system like Islam has. However, desiring to sanctify your country is also part of the faith. Secularist Christians are essentially telling God where he is allowed to be and where he is not allowed to be. It's like they're telling God, you can have domain over the church, you can tell me what to do here, but don't you dare to encroach me on politics. That's an exclusively human affair, and you can't say anything about that, right? That's essentially what Christian secularists are basically saying, right? God can't have any say over, politics. Keep your hands away from that. That's what us humans do. That such an attitude, in fact, betrays Christianity, and so-called Christian nationalists, in turn, are those who can be properly characterized as those who actually do desire to sanctify the country and its institutions and direct people's lives to virtue and goodness. And just because force at times has to be part of it doesn't mean it's evil. Again, we have to use force in order to stop rapists and murderers. That doesn't mean force is evil, right? What that force is directed towards, that is what dedicates whether the force is good or evil, not the force in and of itself. Once again, we already accept the usage of force to maintain values that are fundamentally Christian. Aside from just basic examples like murder, we can even think of slavery. After all, the first person in written history to openly oppose it was St. Gregory of Nyssa, and it was Christendom that ultimately led the charge of abolishing slavery. But how? Did they just gently persuade countries, you need to stop slavery? No. At some point, they will use force. If you're still doing this, we're going to do X, Y, Z to you, right? So it comes down to the usage of force again at some point, or the threat of using force in order to maintain sound morality, ethics, and some kind of unity, right? Finally, I want to go back to the point on how secularism, which is ultimately some kind of atheism at the end of the day, cannot justify legislating morality, since it does not have any epistemic nor metaphysical justification for the concept of objective moral principles, since those worldviews ultimately lack a objective fundamental principle behind reality, which is God. At the same time, ethics isn't as simple as just saying God said so. So some people might misunderstand me, and they might think that I'm pushing for some kind of idea that, God says X, therefore we do X, and that's just the end of the day. No, there's in fact a logic and a system behind it. So from the example of murder, we don't believe murder is evil just because God said so. We believe it is evil because man is made in the image of God, and what is done towards man is in some way, shape, or form is also done towards God. And so if we murder the image of God, we are committing murder in some form against God himself, right? And God, being goodness himself, right, doing evil acts against him is evil, right? Doing acts that nullify his goodness, nullify his virtues, nullify his goodness, is obviously going to be the opposition to God's goodness, which the opposition to goodness is evil, right? Evil is the privation of good. A crucial note I want to make to all Christians that are listening to this is that Christians should not try to cuck themselves out of power and politics. Plato says the best qualified will be reluctant to serve as guardians, but will be forced to serve under penalty of being ruled by their inferiors. In this case, in other words, if Christians concede the ground to those opposed to Christianity on politics, or really in anything, right? This can go to art, culture, and all of these things, right? So because a lot of people, they criticize Christians going on this whole culture war stuff. But if we concede the ground to those who hate Christianity, then Christians will be doomed to be ruled and persecuted by those who oppose them. An opposition to so-called Christian nationalism is really an opposition to Christianity and Christians themselves. Now, it is true that Christianity does not need political power. It is also true that Christ's kingdom is really not of this world. And this is evidenced by those who bravely confessed Christ and were martyred under Roman persecution. But just like how that is part of Christian history, the Romans who became Christian and professed Christ and legislated Christian morality in their government and in their daily lives are also just as much of a part of Christian history. And this is something that we all have to bear in mind in this discussion. Before I end this video, I want to thank you all for watching this. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you like this video, and comment what you think about this issue. And I also want to give special thanks to my Patreon financiers, which you can become one of them by clicking the link in the description below. Thank you to the Goosefather, Abraham, Carl, Dejan, Marco, Theodore, Vander, Sean, Larry, Andy, Peyton, Gigachat, Quinn, Sean, Brian, Marco, Diet Sodalite, Eddie, Node, Maximus, Mitch, Vlad, Kerry, Nectaris, and Norbert. And thank you again for watching this video. I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye and take care.